Hari Om.
Hari Om, sir.
Hari
Hari
Om.
Om.
Hari Om.
Okay, let's start. Om. Om. Sahana Bhavatu. Sahanau Bhunaktu. Sahaviryam Karavavahai. Tejasvinavadhitamastu ma vidvishavahai. Om Shanti. 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 We'll start the class with any questions. Are there any questions? Okay. Since there are none, we'll jump right into the topic we were discussing in the previous class. So we ended last class by talking about, we had begun speaking about the intrinsic being of a self-realized person. A self-realized person, in an absolute sense, is one who has attained enlightenment, and such a person possesses exceptional power. He bears universal love. He possesses boundless knowledge, enjoys total self-sufficiency. He'll talk a lot about self-sufficiency, that concept of self-sufficiency, and of course revels in total fulfillment. So we have started talking about his power. Now, the important point to mention about power is that this power is founded on selflessness. Power that is founded on selfishness, power that is founded on a sense of differentiation between me and you, is a power that is external. It is a power that seeks to dominate over the other. That's not the nature of power we're talking about. Such is a power in front of whom the mightiest bow down, because they have unfolded something remarkable within. We have stories of sages, kings, and rulers, and all sorts of powerful people bowing down before nameless sages. Our parables stories are full with such parables are filled with such stories. They're attractive, and they don't seek to dominate the other. That power is automatic. It's attractive, it's influential. Something they say carries on for generations and generations. It doesn't need to be imposed by the sword. That's the idea. In fact, in the Bhagavad Gita, he says, Upadrashta Anumanta Bharta Bhokta Maheshwara. In the beginning of the spiritual journey, the self is just a witness, it is unengaged in your life. But as you grow, it becomes a permitter, it becomes a enabler, it becomes an enjoyer. Ultimately, it becomes Maheshwara, it becomes all powerful. Means you merge with that all powerful Maheshwara, you become Maheshwara yourself. Even a thought, and it will be fulfilled. Even in the world, when you, first of all, if your power is founded on selfishness, it won't last. It won't last. It's a matter of time before you'll be deposed. But if you are truly unselfish or selfless in your expression of power, people will do your bidding. You will command that power rather than demand it. And the beauty of power, the beauty of true power, is to not use it, is to not express it, is to not need to impose it. To have power and not use it, that's an incredible quality. Some of us get a little bit of power, some of us get a little bit of control, immediately start dominating others. Terrifying. Terrifying. So what I'm trying to say is that the very nature of power is totally different to what you and I are used to. You and I are used to a sense of power that is dominating, that is oppressing, that is, of course, requires a lot of influence to sustain. Here is a power that is attractive. And we mentioned last class, such beings develop siddhis, which are extremely wondrous capabilities. Like Sai Baba, he had siddhis, which attracted countless number of people. Powers that you cannot explain, influence that you cannot imagine. But it's a catch 22. The requirement is selflessness. You have to be selfless. Only then will you truly have this power. He moves on to love. So again, a common misunderstanding is that spiritual people lose care and affection for the world. Spiritual people are disinterested in the world. That has to be read in two ways. There is a lot, of course, you are not mentally obsessed with the world. But the irony is, and the beauty is, that because you give up your obsession, you cultivate true love. It is your attachment that you give up to the world, not your love. On the spiritual journey, it is your attachment you give up. You, in fact, purify your love. Right now, our love is tainted by attachment. Our love is tainted by obsession. Our love is tainted by dependency, expectation, a need to dominate, all sorts of other impurities, which are an expression of our attachment. As we grow spiritually, it is this attachment that we let go of, and what remains is pure love. A self-realized person is an expression of this pure love. He says,
His love. The love that people claim to possess is restricted to the area they identify with. Beyond that area, they engender bitterness, hatred. The area of identification starts with a dot. increases in concentric circles only to get lost in its boundless infinite expanse. The lowest, meanest character confines his love to the dot, to his own personality. No more. He is selfish to the core. In his lifetime, he caters to his welfare only. He does so even at the expense of his family. His love starts and ends with his personality. The next grade of humans moves up to the first circle defined by one's family. A person in this category pours out love for the members of his family. He cares for their welfare, serves and sacrifices for them alone. His love stops there. It does not extend beyond the circumference of the domestic circle. All other families save his present a competition, conflict, bitterness. Higher than this cadre is the individual who identifies with the larger circle, his community. His love reaches beyond the family to embrace the members of his community. His interest is confined to this boundary. Within his circle, he feels a sense of fraternity and friendship. That is his limit of love. Beyond the limit, he engenders hatred, jealousy, and other negative feelings. Thus does love reach further to citizens of his country, to humanity, to all living creatures. Yet the love in all these cases is confined to its area but turns bitter beyond its boundary. Far above all these cadres lies the divine love of a self-realized soul. In him there is no trace of selfishness. His identification, attention, interest is everywhere and nowhere in particular. His love has no boundary, no division or demarcation, no limitation. It is love in its purest form with no qualification or modification.
So, love is an endeavor to become boundless. Love is an endeavor to become boundless. You are essentially removing boundaries of identification as you turn loving. Identifying with just another person to the exclusion of all others, identifying with just one thing to the exclusion of all others, is attachment. Identifying with my wife to the exclusion of all other people, identifying with my children to the exclusion of all others, is an expression of attachment. What do I mean by identification? Means care, concern, empathy with only them. That's what I mean by identification. I'm not saying you have to pay the school fees of your neighbor's children. Huh? Please, the word I'm using is identification. I'm not saying obligation. Big difference. In fact, love is less interference with the other, not more interference. So, identification, what is identification? Identification is nothing but that capacity to empathize, that capacity to feel what the other is feeling, the capacity to recognize oneness with the other. Just as you are a being with feelings and emotions and senses and ideas and thoughts, so is the other. Just as you care about your feelings, just as you care about your self respect, just as you care about your acknowledgement, you care about your appreciation, just as you care about your work, so does the other. And not because they are yours. When the qualification is they are mine, and that's when I will have emotion, that's an attachment. I care for them because they are mine. Care should not be limited. Yeah, obligation is certainly limited. Obligation is certainly limited. but care should not be limited. So, at any point, challenging yourself to recognize the boundary of your identification and cross it. That's the endeavor of love. You have to silently, honestly look within yourself and see your own boundaries which you have set. Does the boundary, is it limited to yourself? Is it limited to your family? Is it limited to your community? Is it limited to your nation? Is it limited to only human beings? Or does it encompass everything? And the more this identification increases with an understanding of life and understanding of the world, they're not unrelated, is what I'm saying. As you increase your understanding of the mystery of life, as you increase your appreciation for the mystery that is existence, you'll begin to appreciate the intricacies of existence. You'll begin to appreciate how incredible all beings are. See, you live around animals, you'll begin to identify with animals. Problem is, we've become these. My domestic help. So I was telling him, why don't you bring your family here? So he says, my wife doesn't like it. I said, why? He's like, she likes to be in the farm with the goats. Uh, he doesn't feel like she'll miss that out here. Now, of course, there is a lot of innocence in that, but that's a complete side of life which we urban people are missing. One of the most um one of the most incredible experiences of my life has been working with plants and animals, getting into farming, getting into working with animals. It just opens your eyes to the wondrousness of the world, the wondrousness of the world. The vegetables you buy in the air-conditioned market, where do they come from? How does it grow? What is the cycle they follow? Seeing a little seed, an invisible seed almost, grow into an incredible plant. Seeing it tender in the beginning, one leaf at a time, you can see it growing. Ascharya, ascharya, incredible. It's wonderment. What goes into creating that? What is in this soil? The soil we trample over. Uh, the soil we trample over, the soil we pollute, from that is coming the very food you eat. What is the power in that soil? What is the power in that seed to take from the soil? So, the more you grow in your appreciation for the wonderment of life, the more you increase your identification, which is why having some level of exposure to these things is important. It's valuable.
Where did you have this experience with farming?
Uh, Back in my college days, started in my
Oh,
college. So, so your capacity to see, love is nothing but identification, and your capacity to identify is a constant endeavor. It's not so. See, no one is a perfect lover until you attain enlightenment. You'll always have a boundary. You'll always have biases. So the endeavor of enlightenment is the endeavor of crossing over these boundaries, the endeavor of removing the attachments, removing the ignorance, becoming more conscious of what's out there, instead of remaining in the cocoon of what's me and mine. Growing out of that cocoon is becoming love. So in a self-realized person, there's no trace of selfishness. His identification, attention, interest, consciousness is everywhere and nowhere in particular. Everywhere and nowhere in particular. No division, no demarcation. That's pure love. He goes on to talk about his knowledge, the knowledge a self realized person possesses, beyond terrestrial knowledge, beyond knowledge of things, his knowledge.
His knowledge. Brahman, the Supreme God, is all pervading. Brahman alone exists, nothing else. That is your real self. You know not yourself. The ignorance of self projects the world, just as ignorance of rope projects an illusory snake. So is this world illusory, stemming out of your ignorance. Hence, all knowledges pertaining to the world spring from the base of ignorance. Even the greatest scientific discovery and invention are within the realm of ignorance vis-a-vis the absolute knowledge of the self. Preeminent scientists have declared that their findings are relative, not absolute. The self alone is absolute real. The world is relative, unreal. The self-realized has found this truth, is established in the knowledge of self, knowledge of Brahman, absolute knowledge. Spiritual ignorance is the cause of all sorrow in the world. There is only one way to eradicate sorrow and establish enduring peace and happiness in life. That is to instill the knowledge of the inner self, knowledge of the absolute reality.
So, beyond intellectually understanding this, it is a knowing within. It's a knowing within. And very often, things that you know you cannot necessarily explain to other people. It's very difficult. You can only explain in terms of objective descriptions of things. But that subjective knowing is altogether different. It's very difficult to convey it. So the subjective knowing of the reality is something we can only express in the way in which a person conducts himself. See, we've used the analogy of the dream. It's like a self-realized person, the knowledge he possesses is like a waker going into the dream. What is the knowledge a waker possesses? A waker possesses the knowledge that this is an illusion. This is just a projection on a screen. It's like entering a movie that you are watching, knowing that, oh, this is just a movie. In the beginning, when you're told this, it's a piece of information. As you grow spiritually, this grows into a suspicion. From information, it grows into a suspicion. Even if it grows into a suspicion, you've gotten very far. Right now, this is information for us. Oh, very good. But as we immerse ourselves in the spiritual process, this grows into a true suspicion. I remember one of Swamiji's lectures when he was talking about the chapter on illusions that will come, Dita. He said, if you do that much in life, you've done enough. You've gone very far. Just have a genuine sense of suspicion. is this waking world just like the dream world? Just as the dreamer felt oh so real while dreaming, am I just the waker feeling oh so real while waking? That's suspicion. So from information, it grows to suspicion, then it turns into conviction, and then realization. So we are talking about a self-realization. A realized person has the realization. Where are we? Are we in the stage of information, suspicion, conviction, realization? Turn information to suspicion itself. That's 80% of the spiritual path. 80% of the spiritual work is turning this piece of information into suspicion.
So when the movie ends, then
Hmm.
we realize that we were in the movie. Or when the dream ends, we get up. Then we realize that we were in the dream. So, like as you're saying, this information we have been hearing from many much time. From 2 years, we're hearing this information. But still, only when this ends, then we can come to know now that the dream. This was a dream. This has ended, and now we are.
See, please don't get me wrong. I don't mean to say that the suspicion can just arise like that, right? See, that suspicion will only arise with complete immersion in the process. Right now, we are completely immersed in things that we are totally involved in. We are totally immersed in um, our aspiration for wealth. We are totally immersed in our family and our other engagements. So that level of immersion, it almost makes everything seem obvious. It's obvious that you will feel happy when something good happens. You'll feel sad when something bad happens. It's almost obvious, right? Why? Because you're completely immersed in that. You totally relate to it, and so do others around you, right? So that obviousness of the experience will only come when you're totally immersed in it. So to develop the suspicion, you have to completely immerse yourself in the spiritual process. Then it'll become obvious. And for that, we've talked about the yogas, we've talked about this theme of mumukshatva. You have to really want it. You have to really, as we say, either through knowledge or experience, realize that the world is not bringing you what you really seek. So all those things have to coalesce together to develop this suspicion. Going back to the analogy, as I said, every analogy has a limitation. So I confess that the concept of a dream has a limitation. Right? You can't be a waker going back into the dream. But that's the that's the only way to relate to this concept of self-realization. The concept of self-realization is a waker going back into the dream with knowledge that they are the waker. Imagine the waker going back into the dream and living the life of the dreamer with knowledge of the waking state, and not theoretical knowledge of the waking state, experiential knowledge of the waking state. See, one is in the dream, you meet a guru and a guru tells you there is a waking state. You have a theoretical knowledge of the waking state. But imagine, and it's not possible, but imagine waking up and that waking being going back into the dream. That's the concept of self realization. Now, turning that concept into a reality has these four stages: information, suspicion, conviction, realization. And we only get this upama, this comparison from those who have confessed it. This is the best words can do. After a point, after that, um, it's only up to us to take it up.
also, sir, the ignorance of self projects the world.
Hmm.
How would you explain this?
Where are you reading this line? Is it an independent statement that you are inquiring about, or did you? Hmm. Okay, the first one, the first line. You know not, the ignorance of self projects the world, just as ignorance of rope projects the illusory snake. That is the concept of Maya. This idea of um, how did this world come about? This world is a creation of illusion. And what is the illusion? We'll step into that chapter soon. But in Vedanta, we talk about two types of illusions: intrinsic illusion, extrinsic illusion. But not delving too much into it yet, because we'll come to it. What is the illusion? You are ignorant of yourself, you're ignorant of your real being, and you project something that mirrors its quality, that mirrors its infinitude. Just like when you are ignorant of a rope lying on the ground and you stumble upon it, you project something that is mimicking some of its qualities, but has altogether a different quality itself. So the ignorance of your real being has led you to the experience of this pluralistic world. Just as ignorance of this waking state, the moment you become ignorant of this waking state, you enter a dream world. The dream world, the ignorance of the waking world projects the dream world. So that's uh, the the way in which you sort of equate that statement. So you have lost your true identity, you have lost knowledge of your true being, and as a result of that, you are projecting this individual being experiencing this pluralistic world. The ignorance of self projects this world. So when we talk about creation, what created the world? The creation of the world wasn't an event. The creation of the world wasn't one moment. The world is born out of your ignorance. You lose the ignorance, the world disappears. You wake up and the dream disappears. You turn off the TV, the movie ends. The movie disappears. Right now, the movie is going on, the TV is on.
So, Ji, what is the place of then sense of wonderment? We have a sense of wonderment right from the childhood, and slowly, that sense of wonderment diminishes because we are so much confused. We don't accept the life as a wonderful thing. So, what is the place of wonderment as compared to what you are saying, illusion and
No, they go parallelly, sir. See,
parallel?
you will be able to appreciate the idea of illusion truly only when you're soaked in the wonderment. See, for someone who sees things as matter of fact and very, um, you know, I'm losing the word for it. I'm not finding the word for it. but someone who sees things in a very I don't, perhaps the word coming to my head is in a practical way, in this sort of created world sense of way, um, who lacks a sense of wonderment. To them, this concept of illusion will seem absurd, right? But when you go into get into the depths of wonderment, and this wonderment, incidentally, this wonderment can come from the most scientific processes. In fact, the most scientific people have the most amount of wonderment. Earlier, people had all sorts of beliefs about microorganisms. They had no concept of microorganisms, of bacteria. They used to treat diseases in all totally different way. Today, we understand there is thing called bacteria. There's thing called a bacterial infection. We give antibiotics. A couple of 100 years ago, people had no concept of this. They had all sorts of funny ideas. Somebody with a deep sense of scientific inquiry investigated it, and of course was amazed. It's wondrous. How does this all function? You look into the smallest of atoms. How does it function? The greatest of scientists, be it Newton, or I don't know if it was Newton or who said that. I think it was Einstein who said, I think I'm standing on. I'm standing on the shores, and my ignorance is as expanse.
Newton said that.
That is it.
Newton.
The ignorance is as expansive as the ocean in front of me, right?
Utsavji, have you observed the plants responding to the emotions of a human being? As you have said that you were watching the plants growing in your youth or childhood and all that. Did you feel that the plants also respond to the emotions of the human beings?
Yeah, in fact, there are many growing theories around it. Um, One of our class members is also deeply involved in some incredible experiments. At some point, if Rahul is in class, sometime we can talk to him about it. But I also worked on a farm where this lady used to play music to the plants. Now, I'm not so much interested in the effects and the benefits and uses of that, as much as I'm interested in the appreciation of that, right? Um, and you don't even have to go to the level of emotions, just the way in which a plant responds to its immediate environment. Forget emotions. People are not even aware that a plant is a living thing that has a direct relation with the nature of the soil that it is contacting, the nature of the air that it is around, the nature of the light that is hitting it or not hitting it. It's incredible. During the day, the flower will open up, then it'll fold back inside. Depending on the type of day, you know, a certain part of the plant will grow or not grow. So you come to appreciate that it is uh, what it means to be living. It means to be connected. It means to be, and there's an incredible intelligence in it that you and I don't appreciate. We just plug the vegetable and we eat it. But there's an incredible intelligence in that, and yes, it extends to perhaps a rudimentary response to human emotions. You know, which is why we always, and it almost makes sense. When you are cutting a plant, make sure it's a gentle cut. Make sure you don't rip it apart. That kind of a thing. Make sure when you cut something, it's sort of painless, rather than uh, hurting the plant, because even though they may not have a nervous system like you or me, but there is a sense of life in it. So you appreciate those things when you are around, you know, and when you are not necessarily looking at it as a source of material benefit. Uh, if I plant 5 rows of corn, I will get 1 ton of corn, and I'll sell it for so much money. When it doesn't reduce to a economic value, you appreciate the life in it. So, but yeah, there is growing investigation, there is growing research. People like Rahul, who are part of our class, is also using that kind of stuff. So if we are curious, more curious, we can talk to him about it at some point. So, coming back to your question about wonderment and illusion, see, illusion is a concept which you perhaps will, the rare one will sort of try to dabble with it, right? Which is why we rarely talk about it. Because if the common man starts talking about illusion, we'll all go crazy. You know, we shouldn't. Just as we always say that only a prepared mind should meditate, similarly, we should talk about it once in a while, get a sense of it, but only a prepared mind should dabble in this business of illusion. But that appreciation for this very idea, this very preposterous sounding idea, the very appreciation for that will only come when you are deeply connected with the wonderment of life, when you're deeply connected with the. So, wonderment has its own benefits. Wonderment puts you at peace with your existence and, helps you relate to the world around you in a better way. And of course, definitely is an essential prerequisite in your further spiritual inquiry. Right? That's what I would say. Okay. So, there is love, there is knowledge, there is power. Then there is a sense of self sufficiency, a very, very important thing to note. What is that sense of feeling within an individual? What does he need? What does he require? Because if you're not self-sufficient, you're dependent. You are, and the moment you're dependent, you are affected, or you are subject to affectation, right? So what is this sense of self-sufficiency, this yearning for freedom that you and we all have, and which we look for it outside, we look for it in a perfect world, we look for it in a world with which functions, in an ideal way. Is there another way of finding that within? Because perhaps the world is never going to be perfect, but is there a way of perfecting one's state within? So this concept of self-sufficiency, where he talks about this very important uh, trait of a spiritually evolved person.
Is self-sufficiency. Living beings can be classified under 3 categories: plant, animal, and human. Of the 3, the plant is most dependent upon the world for its survival. The animal is less dependent, yet much dependent on the environment. A human being alone is designed to be independent, self-sufficient. A self-realized person enjoys absolute independence. He does not depend on anything in the world. Nothing in the world can in any way affect his absolute state of peace and bliss. A plant needs attention. If you leave a plant unattended, it'll perish. Water may be available a few meters away. That will not help the plant. If there is no water at its root, it will die. So also, if it is denied direct sunlight, it cannot help itself to the blazing sunlight just around the corners. A plant is wholly dependent upon the world around. An animal is not totally victimized by the rigors of the external world. It can adapt itself to an extent to different environment and circumstance. If food is not available at its location, the animal finds it elsewhere. If its dwelling place is not suitable, it moves to more conducive environment. Birds and fishes are known to migrate hundreds, thousands of kilometers for that purpose. Nevertheless, all these creatures have a limited capacity to adapt themselves to the changing world. A human being enjoys far greater freedom. He is least dependent upon the stern laws of nature. He can harness nature by artificial devices, conquer space by incredible speed, annihilate time by electronic equipments replaying past events, consume processed food in place of natural produce, cure disease with medicine, substitute virtually anything for what is found wanting in nature. Humans possess such phenomenal powers, yet you find yourself persecuted by the ever-changing world. The reason for victimization is your unintelligent identification with the body, mind, and intellect. Through your constant attention upon these equipments, you have become one with them. Whatever happens to them happens to you. The outside world, constituted of objects, emotions, and thoughts, can affect your body, mind, and intellect, but not yourself. The self within is immaculate. It is transcendental. Nothing terrestrial can influence it, affect it. To live up to the status of a human being, you must shift your focus of attention from the body, mind, and intellect to the real self. To the extent you identify with the self, thereby detach yourself from the material equipments, you shall be freed from the persecution of the world. You shall gain your independence. A self-realized person, having merged with the self, becomes totally self-sufficient, enjoys absolute independence, revels in supreme liberation.
So I'll leave you with we'll continue this discussion in the next class, but I'll leave you with a thought and a new way of looking at this concept of self-sufficiency. See, we always think of self-sufficiency as um, it's almost also misunderstood as not needing anything or not asking for anything, or you know it's almost like self-sufficiency is expected out of you. No, it's not that self-sufficiency is expected out of you. It's not like a moral requirement. The idea is, as you grow spiritually, you become self-sufficient. And what is the source of that self-sufficiency? The source of that self-sufficiency is one's own detachment from one's body, mind, and intellect. What does that mean? See, on the one hand, as he talked about plants, animals, and humans are perhaps the most adaptable creatures. Plants are wholly dependent on the world, animals are still partially dependent on the world. Humans have completely adapted themselves to the world. They can change their environment based on challenges. So, on the one hand, we express this great capacity to adapt to any circumstance externally, and yet we are victims of very simple things. A human that is capable of such incredible things externally is still subject to suffering. Why is that? And that's simply because while we have fixed the outside world, and while we have used our capacity to deal with the world outside, we quite haven't attended to our own minds, its desires, its wishes and fancies, its attachments. So, like you have gained control of the world outside, if you gain control of this world inside, automatically you'll be less dependent on changes. You'll be able to adapt, and you'll be able to modify. So self-sufficiency is not so much not asking for anything, but that capacity to adapt to any circumstance. When you are in South India, adapt to South India. When you are in South America, adapt to South America. Adjusting your own mind and its expectations, adjusting your own body and its demands, adjusting your own ideas, intellect and its ideas, and you know, there's also attachment at the level of the intellect. That capacity to adapt your internal being to any environment, that's what brings about self-sufficiency. So a self-realized person who is one who has complete control, not of the world outside, but of the world inside. That's where they become self-sufficient. They don't need anything. Put them in any environment, they're able to adjust to it. You go to Italy, you will have to eat pizza, pasta, pizza, pasta, pizza, pasta 20 times. Adapt to it. You go to South India, you'll have to eat rasam rice, rasam rice, rasam rice 20 times. Adjust to it. That capacity to adapt. Now, if the mind is ruling you, it'll always be crying, and you'll be a victim of that crime. You'll not be self-sufficient. You'll be in Italy looking for an Indian restaurant. Why? Because your mind is not willing, or whatever you'll be looking for. I'm giving you a simple example. So, the extent to which we are self-sufficient depends on the extent to which we have a control regulation over our own internal being, not so much the external being. We'll continue this discussion on self sufficiency in the next class, but we'll conclude out here. I have a hard stop, I have to head out. So, thank you so much for joining. Thank you so much for coming, and we'll see you. We'll continue next Monday with this chapter on self sufficiency. Have a good week.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Hari Om.
Hari Om.
Thank
Thank
you.
you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.